What NASA never wants you to know about these missions will change how you see space forever. The real reason these astronauts never made it home is more terrifying than you can imagine. You have to stick around until the end to hear the final recorded words of one crew that will leave you speechless. He rose through the pale morning light over Edwards Air Force Base, his silver helmet catching the sun like a mirror of the unknown. Major Michael J. Adams, 37 years old, carried the calm precision of a man who understood both the beauty and brutality of flight. The X-15 was no ordinary aircraft. It was made of steel, meant to taste the edge of space, to graze the heavens and return with data written in fire. On that cold November morning in 1967, Adams was to climb higher than any American test pilot before him, touching the void where Earth's blue gives way to eternal black. The B-52 released him at 45,000 feet. And the rocket beneath him ignited, screaming toward the stratosphere. Inside, he felt the weight of Earth fall away. At 266,000 feet, he crossed the invisible threshold, becoming one of the few to drift between air and eternity. For a brief, impossible moment, he was both man and star. Then the silence began to unravel. The X-15 yawed, a slow tilt that should have been correctable, but the reaction control thrusters faltered. The aircraft began to spin. There was no air to bite the wings, no friction to obey the laws of recovery. The thin atmosphere offered only indifference. By the time Adams descended below 200,000 feet, the spin had grown monstrous. His flight path twisted into a blur of data and dread. Ground control called out, their voices breaking through static. But communication was already dying in the plasma sheath surrounding the falling craft. When the X-15 finally met the thickening air, the resistance tore it apart. 15 times the force of gravity crushed his body before the desert claimed him. When recovery crews found the crater near Johannesburg, California, Adams was still in his seat, his mission data floating like ashes. His name would be carved into the list of those who touched space and never returned, but the sky has always been hungry for more. 4 years later, in the shadow of triumph, another silence unfolded. The world watched as Soyuz 11 fell gracefully back to Earth, its parachutes blooming like white lilies over the Kazakh steppe. To the cameras, it was a perfect homecoming, 3 Soviet heroes returning from mankind's first successful stay aboard a space station. Commander Georgy Dobrovolsky, flight engineer Vladislav Volkov, and research engineer Viktor Patsayev had lived among the stars for 22 days inside Salyut 1, proving that humans could work, sleep, and dream in the vacuum of space. Their voices over radio had been calm and proud. They had laughed, sung songs, even requested extra experiments. But when the capsule touched down and the rescuers opened the hatch, the cheering stopped. Inside, the men were motionless, their faces pale and blue, still strapped to their seats as if sleeping through eternity. The investigation revealed the cruelest simplicity. A small valve, meant to open only at low altitude, had ruptured when a bolt fired during module separation. The air had escaped silently into space. Within 112 seconds, their cabin pressure had dropped to nothing. In that silence, consciousness slipped away in 20 seconds, life in less than a minute. They had died above the Earth they had just conquered. The Soyuz 11 tragedy forced the world to confront how fragile survival was beyond the thin line of atmosphere, how even a screw or a spring could decide the fate of heroes. From then on, every cosmonaut would wear a pressure suit during launch and re-entry. The lesson had been written in breath and blood. Before the Soviets could recover, another pilot walked knowingly into his doom. His name was Vladimir Komarov, and he had stared into the eyes of inevitability long before his capsule even left the ground. It was April 1967, the dawn of the Soyuz era. The Soviet Union, desperate to eclipse the American Apollo program, prepared to launch its first crewed spacecraft. Komarov, a 40-year-old veteran, was chosen to fly. But the ship, Soyuz 1, was a mosaic of malfunctions, over 200 critical flaws. From tangled wiring to defective parachutes. His friend Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, begged the Kremlin to postpone the flight. No one listened. The mission had been scheduled to celebrate Lenin's birthday. Political glory outweighed human life. Komarov knew that if he refused, Gagarin would be ordered to take his place. So he agreed, knowing full well that one of them would die. When Soyuz 1 rose from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, the morning sky was clear, but inside the capsule, chaos reigned. One solar panel refused to open, robbing the spacecraft of power. The ship began to tumble, its sensors failing to find the Sunday. Komarov fought to stabilize it, his voice steady but weary as he reported failure after failure. The planned rendezvous with Soyuz 2 was canceled. His mission became survival. After 18 orbits, Mission Control ordered an emergency re-entry. At 23,000 feet, the main parachute jammed in its container, the backup tangled with it, creating a knotted mess that refused to open. As he fell toward Orenburg, Komarov's final transmission was not a prayer, it was fury. He cursed the officials who had forced him into a defective tomb. Moments later, Soyuz 1 struck the Earth at over 200 miles per hour, flattening into a disk of molten metal. They found him fused to the wreckage, a blackened silhouette against the smoldering ground. His death silenced Soviet spaceflight for 18 months, but no silence lasts forever. 19 years later, the morning air above Cape Canaveral shimmered with anticipation. Teachers, students, and families filled the viewing stands as the Space Shuttle Challenger prepared for liftoff. Among the 7 astronauts was Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher from New Hampshire, smiling with the joy of a dream made real. It was January 28, 1986, a day meant to inspire millions of children to reach for the stars. Overnight, Florida's temperature had plunged to levels unseen in previous launches. Engineers from Morton Thiokol, the makers of the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, had warned that the cold might stiffen the rubber O-rings that sealed the booster joint. They begged NASA to delay. But deadlines, cameras, and politics shouted louder than caution. The order was given, proceed. At 11:38 a.m., Challenger climbed into a flawless blue sky. For 72 seconds, it was perfection, white, flame, and thunder. Then, a spark. A thin tongue of fire slipped from the right booster's joint, exactly where the engineers had feared. It burned through the external tank's support strut, slicing into the hydrogen reservoir. A heartbeat later, the sky became an inferno. The shuttle erupted in a plume that split the heavens, a bloom of smoke and disbelief. The command module tore free, intact but helpless, tumbling through the air. Inside, oxygen masks deployed. Some crew members were still conscious, breathing, trying to understand what had happened. The cabin fell for 2 minutes and 45 seconds before striking the Atlantic at 200 miles per hour. The ocean swallowed the wreckage and the nation's innocence. In the aftermath, America paused its reach for the stars. The Rogers Commission uncovered how warnings had been dismissed, how silence had been mistaken for safety. The shuttle program slept for nearly 3 years, haunted by the sight of that expanding cloud in the winter sky. And yet, even grief could not keep humanity grounded forever. 17 years later, it happened again. On February 1, 2003, Space Shuttle Columbia glided over the Pacific Ocean, beginning its return from a 16-day mission of science and wonder. Commander Rick Husband and his crew William McCool, Kalpana Chawla, David Brown, Laurel Clark, Michael Anderson, and Ilan Ramon had orbited Earth conducting over 80 experiments. Their laughter, their messages, their pride all spoke of triumph. But unseen, far below them, the seeds of disaster had already taken root. During launch, a piece of insulating foam had broken off the fuel tank and struck the left wing, carving a small wound in its heat shield. NASA had seen the footage, requested no further imaging, and concluded it was nothing. After all, foam strikes had happened before. Now, as Columbia descended through the atmosphere, that wound became its undoing. Superheated plasma entered the breach, devouring the wing from within. Sensors blinked red, systems failed one by one, and yet the crew remained calm, unaware that death had already entered the ship. Over Texas, at 200,000 feet, the wing gave way. The shuttle tore apart, scattering across the morning sky. Witnesses below described it as a meteor shower of sorrow trails of fire stretching from horizon to horizon. The voices of Mission Control, breaking through static, called their names again and again, but the heavens offered only silence. Columbia's loss ended the space shuttle era's illusion of invincibility. But from the ashes came humility, new safety systems, new repair procedures, and a renewed respect for the unknown. Each disaster, each sacrifice carved a lesson into the conscience of exploration. Humanity's story among the stars has never been written in triumph alone. It is a book bound in risk, inked with courage, and turned by those who dared to go where no one else could. For every flame that consumed a spacecraft, there was another that lit the path forward. From Adams to Komarov, from Dobrovolsky and Volkov and Patsiev to the crews of Challenger and Columbia, their echoes live in the whisper of every rocket launch, in the hum of every mission control headset, in the quiet determination of those who still look up. Because even after all the fire and falling metal, humanity still gazes at the stars, not with fear, but with the unshakable faith that the sky, no matter how cruel, is still worth reaching for. After hearing how dreams of space turned into moments of heartbreak, do you believe exploration is worth the lives it demands? Were these missions acts of courage, negligence, or both? What would you have done in their place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more untold stories from the edge of history.